Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible true crime stories you've ever heard. This is the story of Delimar Vera, the baby who died in a fire. Except, she didn't.
Before we begin, I want you to imagine something. You're a new mother. Your baby is just 10 days old. A fire breaks out in your home. You escape, but your baby doesn't. The authorities tell you she's gone, completely consumed by the flames. There's no body to bury, no closure, just emptiness. But deep in your heart, something tells you they're wrong. What would you do? Would you accept what everyone is telling you, or would you trust that voice inside that says your child is still out there somewhere? Today, I'm going to tell you about a mother who chose to trust that voice, and her decision would lead to one of the most incredible true crime stories you've ever heard. This is the story of Delimar Vera, the baby who died in a fire, except she didn't. It was December 15th, 1997, just before Christmas, in Philadelphia. In a modest home in North Philadelphia, Luz Cuevas was experiencing the joy of new motherhood. Her daughter, Delimar Vera, was just 10 days old, a tiny, perfect baby who had brought immense happiness to Luz and her partner, Pedro Vera. That evening, as Luz settled Delimar into her crib for the night, everything seemed normal. But sometime during the night, a fire broke out in their home. The flames spread quickly, and Luz found herself in every parent's worst nightmare. Fighting through the smoke and flames, Luz managed to escape with her two other children. But when she reached safety and looked back at the inferno, she realized with horror that Delimar was still inside. The baby's room was completely engulfed in flames. When firefighters searched through the debris, they found no trace of the infant. No body, no remains, nothing. The medical examiner's report was stark. Delimar Vera had been completely consumed by the fire. The intense heat had incinerated everything, leaving no physical evidence. The case was closed almost before it had begun. But Luz Cuevas couldn't accept it. Something deep inside her told her that her daughter was still alive. She had no evidence, no proof, nothing but a feeling that everyone dismissed as the desperate hope of a grieving mother. But Luz refused to give up. In the months and years following the fire, Luz's behavior worried those around her. While others grieved and tried to move forward, she became obsessed with finding evidence that Delimar was alive. She would drive through neighborhoods, looking at children, hoping to catch a glimpse of her daughter. The authorities were patient at first, but as months turned into years, their patience wore thin. Luz's insistence that her daughter was alive began to be seen as an unhealthy fixation. Pedro seemed to accept the official explanation and tried to move on, which put strain on their relationship. What Luz didn't know was that there were people who knew the truth about what had happened that night. People who knew that Delimar hadn't died in the fire at all, but had been taken. People who were watching Luz's desperate search with guilt and fear, knowing they could end her suffering, but choosing to remain silent. As the years passed, Luz's life became consumed by her search. She would follow up on any lead, no matter how small. A child who looked like Delimar at a grocery store. A tip from someone who thought they had seen something. Each lead ended in disappointment, but Luz never stopped believing. Friends and family staged interventions, begging her to seek therapy, to accept reality, to let go of her impossible hope. Some relationships were damaged permanently by Luz's refusal to move on. But she couldn't explain what she felt in her heart, that somewhere out there her daughter was alive and needed her. While Luz spent her days searching, that same daughter was growing up just 15 miles away in New Jersey, completely unaware of the truth about her identity. The baby who had been born, Delimar Vera, was now known as Aaliyah Correa, and she believed that Carolyn Correa was her mother. Carolyn Correa was distantly related to Pedro Vera, which had given her access to the family. On the night of the fire, while everyone was dealing with the chaos, she had seen an opportunity and taken it. In the confusion and smoke, she had entered the baby's room and taken Delimar. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. Carolyn had a history of telling people she was pregnant when she wasn't, of creating elaborate stories about her life. She had even been facing legal troubles, charges for theft and arson from her workplace, and having a newborn baby might have helped her case. And then opportunity presented itself. Aaliyah was playing near where Luz was standing, and Luz noticed that the child had something caught in her hair. Without thinking, Luz reached out and gently removed it, taking the opportunity to collect a few strands of the girl's hair. "There you go, sweetheart," Luz said softly, her voice trembling. "You had something stuck in your hair." Aaliyah looked up at her with those bright, familiar eyes and smiled. "Thank you," she said, and in that moment, Luz knew with absolute certainty that she was looking at her daughter. As Luz left the party that day, clutching the strands of hair, she knew that her real fight was just beginning. But for the first time in 6 years, she had something more than just hope. She had evidence. The days following the birthday party were intense. Luz had the hair samples and her absolute certainty, but she knew that convincing the authorities would be an uphill battle. For 6 years, they had dismissed her claims. Why would they believe her now? But Luz was no longer the desperate mother who had been easy to dismiss. 6 years of searching had made her stronger and more determined. She went to the Philadelphia Police Department with her story and her evidence, demanding a DNA test. The reception was exactly what she had expected. The officers listened politely, but she could see the skepticism in their eyes. Here was the woman who had been insisting for years that her dead daughter was alive, now claiming she had found her at a birthday party. "Mrs. Cuevas," one officer said gently, "we understand that you've never been able to accept what happened, but we investigated this thoroughly 6 years ago. Your daughter died in that fire." But Luz refused to be dismissed again. She had evidence now. And she wasn't leaving until they agreed to test it. She demanded to speak to supervisors, threatened to go to the media, made it clear that she wasn't going to quietly disappear this time. "Test the hair," she insisted, over and over again. "Just test the hair. If I'm wrong, I'll never bother you again. But if I'm right, then you need to help me get my daughter back." Finally, the police agreed to have the hair samples tested. They warned her that when the results came back negative, she would need to accept the truth and move on. Luz agreed to those terms, but she wasn't worried. She knew what the results would show. The wait for the DNA results was agonizing. Meanwhile, Carolyn Correa seemed to sense that something was wrong. She began acting strangely, keeping Aaliyah closer to home, limiting her interactions with others. When the DNA results finally came back, they confirmed what Luz had known in her heart. Aaliyah Correa was indeed Delimar Vera. The child who had supposedly died in a fire 6 years earlier was alive and well. The police response was swift. Within hours, they had obtained warrants and were moving to arrest Carolyn Correa. But Carolyn didn't wait for them. Sensing that her time was up, she turned herself in to authorities. The arrest made national news immediately. The story of the baby who had died in a fire but was actually kidnapped captured public imagination. But for Luz, the media attention was secondary to the most important moment of her life, being reunited with her daughter. The reunion between Luz and Delimar was both everything she had dreamed of and more complicated than she could have imagined. After 6 years of separation, mother and daughter were strangers to each other. Delimar, who still thought of herself as Aaliyah, was confused and frightened by the sudden upheaval. The child didn't speak Spanish, while Luz spoke limited English. She had been living in a completely different world, and now she was expected to bond with people who were strangers to her, even though they were her blood relatives. For Luz, holding her daughter again was pure joy. But it was also heartbreaking. This wasn't the baby she had lost. This was a 6-year-old child who had been shaped by experiences that Luz hadn't been part of. Delimar had been through trauma and neglect, and now she was facing even more upheaval. The transition was difficult for everyone. Delimar had to learn a new name, adjust to a new family, a new home, a new language, and a new culture. The media portrayed the reunion as a fairy tale ending, but the reality was much more complex. As the investigation continued, the full scope of what had happened began to emerge. Carolyn Correa had a long history of deception and criminal behavior. She had been facing charges for theft and arson even before the kidnapping, and investigators suspected that taking Delimar might have been part of a plan to gain sympathy and avoid prison time. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover evidence that suggested Carolyn might not have acted alone. The fire had been too convenient, too perfectly timed, and Carolyn's connection to the family through Pedro raised uncomfortable questions. Some investigators began to suspect that Pedro Vera himself might have been part of the plot. He had never been fully convinced that Delimar was his daughter. He had been notably absent during the fire, claiming he had gone to the store, and his relationship with Carolyn gave him both motive and opportunity.
Pedro vehemently denied any involvement and was never charged, but the suspicion cast a shadow over the family's reunion and added another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. The case against Carolyn moved forward quickly. Faced with overwhelming evidence, she eventually pleaded guilty to kidnapping and related charges. In September 2005, she was sentenced to 9 to 30 years in prison. The judge called her crime one of the most heinous acts imaginable. Not just the kidnapping itself, but the years of allowing Luz to suffer, knowing that she could end that suffering with a single phone call.
The Delimar Vera case became a media sensation, inspiring documentaries and even a Disney movie. Luz Cuevas was hailed as a hero, a woman who had trusted her instincts when everyone told her to give up. But behind the headlines, the reality was complicated. Delimar struggled with identity issues that would last for years. "I hated Delimar at the beginning," she would later say. "What is that? Delimar. People would call me and I wouldn't look at them. I wanted my old name." The language barrier made things even more difficult. Delimar spoke only English, while her real family primarily spoke Spanish. She had to learn not just a new name and family, but essentially a new culture.
As the years passed, more details about Delimar's life with Carolyn emerged. The child had been neglected, abused, and traumatized. "I remember running from her," Delimar would later recall. "She had this belt with little circles on it, and when she hit me with it, I'd have the imprints of those circles on my body." The case raised important questions about how missing children cases are investigated and how seriously we take parents' concerns when they contradict official findings. It showed that sometimes the most unlikely explanations can be correct, and that dismissing someone's concerns as denial can have serious consequences. Today, Delimar Vera is a young woman who has built a life that bridges her two identities. She maintains relationships with both sides of her family, though questions about her father's potential involvement continue to complicate those relationships. Luz Cuevas remains a powerful advocate for missing children and their families. Her story has inspired other parents never to give up hope, and her case has led to changes in how such investigations are conducted. The story of Delimar Vera is ultimately about the power of a mother's love and the importance of never giving up hope. It challenges us to trust our instincts, even when everyone says we're wrong. It's about the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds between parent and child. But it's also about the failures of systems that are supposed to protect us and the devastating impact that one person's selfish actions can have on multiple lives. The case raised important questions about how missing children cases are investigated and showed that sometimes a mother's intuition is more reliable than official investigations. In a world where children go missing every day, the story of Delimar Vera stands as a beacon of hope. It proves that sometimes, against all odds, the impossible can happen. Sometimes the dead can come back to life. Sometimes a mother's faith can move mountains. And sometimes love really can conquer all. This has been the incredible true story of Delimar Vera, the baby who died in a fire but didn't. If this story moved you, please share it with others, because somewhere out there, another parent might be searching for their missing child, and they need to know that they should never give up hope.
But what makes this case even more extraordinary is the psychological complexity of what Delimar experienced during those 6 years. Imagine being a child who senses that something fundamental about your life isn't quite right, but having no way to understand or articulate what that feeling means. Delimar would later describe having dreams and feelings that she couldn't explain, a sense of displacement that she carried with her throughout her childhood. The woman she called mother, Carolyn Correa, had created such an elaborate deception that it extended far beyond just changing the child's name. She had created an entire false history, complete with fabricated stories about Delimar's birth, her early development, and her family background. She had even gone so far as to create fake medical records and school documents to support her lies. What's particularly chilling is that Carolyn had been planning this deception for months, possibly even years, before the fire occurred. Investigators later discovered that she had been telling people she was pregnant long before Delimar was born, despite the fact that she wasn't actually expecting a child. She had been setting up the foundation for her lie, creating a narrative that would allow her to suddenly appear with a baby without raising too many questions.
The fire itself remains one of the most disturbing aspects of this case. While it was officially ruled an accident caused by faulty wiring, many investigators have questioned whether it was actually set deliberately to provide cover for the kidnapping. The timing was too perfect, the circumstances too convenient for it to be a simple coincidence. Think about the level of planning and cold calculation that would have been required to pull off such a scheme. Carolyn would have had to know the layout of the house, understand the family's routines, and time everything perfectly to be able to take the baby without being detected. She would have had to be prepared with transportation, a place to take the child, and a complete plan for how to integrate a stolen baby into her own life. The psychological impact on Luz during those 6 years cannot be overstated. She was essentially gaslit by an entire system. Police, fire investigators, medical examiners, family members, and friends all told her that she was wrong, that she was living in denial, that she needed to accept reality and move on. The strength it took to maintain her conviction in the face of such overwhelming opposition is almost impossible to comprehend. There were moments during those 6 years when Luz came close to giving up. The constant disappointment, the strain on her relationships, the financial burden of her search, it all took a tremendous toll, but something deep inside her, that inexplicable connection between mother and child, kept her going even when logic and reason suggested she should stop. The birthday party encounter itself is almost too incredible to believe. What are the odds that after 6 years of searching, Luz would randomly encounter her daughter at a family gathering? It's the kind of coincidence that would seem far-fetched in a work of fiction, but sometimes reality is stranger than anything we could imagine. When Delimar was finally returned to her real family, the challenges were immense. She had to learn not just a new language and culture, but an entirely new way of being in the world. The family she had known, dysfunctional as it was, had been her reality for 6 years. Suddenly being told that everything she believed about herself was a lie was traumatic in ways that are difficult to fully understand. The reunion was further complicated by the ongoing investigation and the media attention. Instead of being able to heal and bond in private, the family was thrust into the spotlight, with reporters and documentary filmmakers wanting to capture every moment of their story. This added pressure made an already difficult situation even more challenging. The questions about Pedro's potential involvement continue to haunt the family to this day. While he was never charged with any crime, the suspicion that he might have been complicit in his own daughter's kidnapping has created lasting divisions and trust issues within the family. Delimar has had to navigate these complex relationships while trying to build her own sense of identity and belonging. The case also highlighted serious flaws in the systems designed to protect children. How was Carolyn able to cross state lines with a stolen baby and establish a new identity for her without anyone asking questions? How did she manage to enroll the child in school, obtain medical care, and live openly in a community for 6 years without anyone becoming suspicious? These systemic failures point to larger issues about how we track and protect children, how we investigate missing persons cases, and how seriously we take parents' concerns when they contradict official findings. The Delimar Vera case has led to important changes in protocols and procedures, but it also serves as a reminder of how much work still needs to be done. Today, more than 20 years after the fire that started this incredible saga, the story of Delimar Vera continues to resonate with people around the world. It's a story that challenges our assumptions about truth and reality, about the power of intuition versus the authority of institutions, and about the lengths that love will go to protect what matters most. For parents of missing children, Luz Cuevas has become a symbol of hope and determination. Her refusal to give up, her willingness to trust her instincts, even when everyone told her she was wrong, and her ultimate vindication serve as inspiration for families who find themselves in similar situations. The story also serves as a cautionary tale about the people we trust and the assumptions we make about those closest to us. Carolyn Correa was not a stranger who snatched a baby from a park. She was someone the family knew. Someone who had been welcomed into their home, someone who used that trust to commit an unthinkable crime. In the end, the story of Delimar Vera is a testament to the power of a mother's love and the importance of never giving up hope, no matter how impossible the situation might seem. It's a reminder that sometimes the most incredible stories are true, that miracles can happen, and that love really can conquer all. This has been the extraordinary true story of Delimar Vera, a story of loss and hope, of deception and truth, of a mother's unwavering faith and a daughter's journey home. It's a story that proves that sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible becomes possible, and the dead really can come back to life. If you like this video, subscribe so you don't miss out on new interesting stories.